Okay, so I would like to start with thank you for organizing, for giving the possibility to talk about my research. So I'm going to talk about evolution algorithm, which as you already know, used for structure predictions. But in my talk, I will focus more on practical aspects. So, okay. Let's imagine that we have to find the structure. Most likely it is so that some experiments come to your office and just give you 3D composition and asking, okay, so can you predict the structure? And that will be the task for us. So, but the problem is that obviously, well, even 2D projection of potential energy sources looks very complicated. Has a lot of for crystal structures. We can use some already known minerals and check. But we have to keep in mind that already in the case of having 5 atoms in the unit cell, the possible number of the structures is 100,000. So the most obvious way is to use another approach of data mining is to use automatic rational search, which would allow us to screen much more structures. So next I will tell you more about one of the evolutionary method code, which is called USPEP. Then I will tell you about the interface which we made for this code, and next I will come to the results which we got for prediction of magnetic structures. So, in fact, many optimization methods were developed to solve the structures, and USPEF actually is one of the evolutionary algorithm-based code, and well, basically it means success in English. So, USPEF allows to predict different kinds of structures, starting from nanoparticles and up to crystals. Apart from searching for enthalpy, we can predict band gap, hardness, relative constant, and I think some other properties. And it's already interfaced with a wide range of other efficient DFT codes. So, for me, I would say that in general there are two main advantages related to my research, why I decided to use evolution algorithm and why this code. So first of all, evolution algorithm doesn't require any experimental data, it doesn't require any starting geometry. So, as you already maybe know from the previous talk, it starts from a completely random set of the structures. And secondly, USPEF actually uses DFT codes for local optimization, which allows us to get very accurate results. And obviously, it also helps us to kind of reduce multidimensionality of the search space and kind of zooming in to the most promising spaces. So now let's consider the working flow of the USPEP. So in the beginning, we have to set up obviously input file, and the only required information for that would be chemical composition. So you specify atom type and the number of atoms for the unit cell. So next step, USPEF randomly generate the set of the structures, which is called generation population, depending on the context. And in this case, USPEF has a lot of advanced techniques because, as you probably know, it's very possible that the code will generate kind of crazy structures, and obviously we don't want to spend the time on that. So in that case, USPEF helps a lot to provide reusable structures. Next step is to use DFT to find the local minima and then to create a population. Also, in this case, the USPEF has a lot of good features which allows to avoid such very known problems as trapping in the funnel or genetic drift, when we basically have very similar structures, our population, and the code think that, okay, we're done, found the most stable structure. Okay, so now let's consider about creation of new population. So first of all, some fraction of the new population is made by using again random approach to justify that our research is biased. And another fraction is used by using variation operators. So basically, the optimized structures from the previous generation, which considered as the best ones, so based on the criteria which we specified, in most cases obviously the energy. So in this case, the lowest energy structures are used as the parents, and then we use the list of the operators, which we also specify in the input file. So for example, heredity, which uses 2 parents for producing a new structure, basically averaging the lattices and randomly using covariance slabs of 2 structures. Another operator is permutation, which allows to exchange several times different types of atoms in the structure, and it's very important to achieve correct atomic ordering structure. So next is mutation, which is divided on the lattice mutation and atom mutation. But in case of atom mutation, there's also 2 different types. One of them is soft mutation, when atoms move along low frequency mode, and core mutation is basically atomic mutation, but in fact it's something more complicated. So then again, it's obviously using DFT for local optimization, and this process is repeating in a loop until the halting criteria will be met and will be satisfied. So next, there is the part of DFT, and specifically our motivation for making the interface of the USPEF. So our primary object for the research are 3D transition metal oxides, which are known to be as magnetic ones. So it is quite known that in general magnetic structures are very difficult for let's say for DFT itself, but it's not possible to find anyway with using standard GG. So the most obvious way for us was to use hybrid functionals, which includes Hartree-Fock power plane. So the problem was that interface was not interfaced with it was interfaced with the cores which has hybrids, but most of them was plane waves, and it is known that hybrids with plane waves is very slow. So we decided to use crystal holes, which is local atomic basic set based, and therefore interface was needed for that. So now let's explain more about the role of the DFT in the USPEF, and also you will get the feeling what actually this interface means. So obviously one of the most important things for any crystal structure prediction code is to be completely optimized. So basically we submit the input file and then we just wait. So in the first step, obviously, when USPEF generate the set of the structures, the coordinate has to be given to the input files of the DFT code, and then USPEF should submit the jobs. Then it has to check the progress time to time, and if the calculation is converged, it has to extract the required parameters and give it back to some kind of summary file of the USPEF. So in case if we have enthalpy, the fitness parameter, it's obviously enthalpy, composition, volume, key points, and symmetry. So then there can be different options. First of all, we can proceed with a creation of new population, but here is a very important feature of the USPEF, which allows to use second relaxation steps, which basically means that in the first population, when the random structures are made, the structure itself can be in very bad shape, and a lot of time will be spent on the optimization process, which we don't want to, of course. The possible way is to start with very weak convergence criteria and to wait if the structure is survived. If it is survived, then we will start with second relaxation step with tighter criteria, and then maybe even more. It's up to us to decide. Then, so in this case, we will have the list of the very good structures. And also, and all after that, USPEF will create new population, then step by step to others. Okay, so now I'm going to discuss the results which we got for magnetic structures. So we started with simple case nickel oxide. Nickel oxide is known to be stable in antiferromagnetic mode. So initially we set up in the input file have 4 atoms in the unit cell, and within the USPEC simulation, we use PBO0 method with this balance set, and obviously all calculations were spin polarized. So it took 10 generations and including 139 structures to find the experimentally known structures with correct spin ordering. As you can see, the geometry was reproduced very, very accurately, and also magnetic moment is in the range of experimentally known values. Then to justify our approach, we also decided to check cobalt oxide, which is basically has a similar or exactly the same cubic crystal system. So in this case, it took 12 generations for the run. And also in this case, we found the correct structure. The difference in magnetic moment is due to the orbital moment, which is not taken into account in the calculation. Basically, spin orbital interaction is not taken into account. But experimental knows that it is 1, so basically if we'll add 1 to 270 to 7, it will be also in the range of the measured values. Okay, so now it was quite simple cases, but then we decided to also move something more complicated and try to find hematite, which has already 10 atoms in the unit cell. So in this case, the run considered 153 candidate structures. And also in this case, as you see, the results are pretty good. So geometry reproduced exactly as it should be, and some small difference in magnetic moment, which is in line with usually reported values by hybrid functionals. Okay, so far it was pretty simple and straightforward. So everything was found already from the first run. We didn't need to do anything, but then we decided to move something really tough and consider copper oxide, which is, well, first of all, it has 16 atoms in the unit cell. It's already quite big for hybrid DFT, if we think about magnetic nature. And also it has low symmetry group, which is even more nasty. So in this case, we found some small, let's say, minor problems. But anyway, the structure was to be found correctly, but the difference with the experimental known structure was in spin ordering, because we got a bit different. So, but anyway, as you see, other parameters were very close, and the energy of our structure was just less than 0.6 kilojoules per mole per unit, which basically can be considered as DFT error. So in this case, we see two possible reasons for this, let's say, for this problem. So first of all, so far the interface for crystal is developed in such a way that magnetic moment kind of hidden variable. So within the USPEC run, USPEC doesn't recognize it as an internal variable, doesn't use it for construction for new generations. The second problem is that when we have magnetic structures, we cannot allow currently to use symmetry, and it also complicates research. Because USPEC basically use fine sim code for determination of the symmetry, and therefore if we will use it, it will not see the difference in atoms with different spin moments. So I think that these two main points can be set up as the possible improvements and implementation for the future version of USPEC, because right now USPEC is written in MATLAB, and when we contacted them, the USPEC group developers, they said that they are moving this code to Python. So when it is officially released, also this interface will be documented, and also maybe after that we can think about implementation of these two features. And also one last thing, that since this interface is not documented, it's not officially released, we started to make our internal, but also for, well, everyone can check the webpage, USPEC Wiki webpage, where you can find the examples and explanation of the interface and the general working principle of that. But obviously you can visit the official webpage and see the manual there. So thank you for your attention.
Thanks a lot. are you using SVP and when are you using TZVP?
Oh yeah, sorry, I made this point. So for the USPEC, we use TCP because it's cheaper, but then USPEC in the end provided a list of the, let's say, good structures files. Then we took the most stable structure, lowest energy structure, and reoptimized it. But basically already SVP provided the correct structure of the slate and correct.
Yeah, so exact exchange is not really doing anything for a strong correlation, but it introduces the problem of spin contamination. So, do you have any comment on that?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't say so because anyway, hard to fall apart. But anyway,
Yes, that's a problem. Hartree-Fock is horribly spin contaminated in these metallic structures.
well, let's say we haven't encountered any problems so far. So apart from these copper oxide cases. But yeah, that's a good
Yes. What about non-collinear magnetic configurations? Are you also looking for this?
No. Okay.
It's much more difficult.
Yeah. Computationally, I would say so.
So how would you change the genetic algorithm to be sensitive to the magnetic moments? Because you can't easily read them off from the atomic structure, which is all respect C's.
So we have some kind of template files for the crystal code, and there we specify spin somehow, like in a random way, like spins up, spins down, and then already during the local optimization, it optimizes.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question that is related to that one. So you mentioned that you use symmetry, but sometimes you have the situation that your magnetic unit cell has a different size than your geometric unit cell. So how do you handle that?
So far, we assume that we already knew the unit cell. So in general, it has to be done so that we have to check different unit cells, obviously, if we don't know the structure. That's what we're doing right now.
Okay, I see no further questions, so let's thank our speaker again.